We see the players wearing those "pay us what you owe us" shirts during warm-ups. We hear the chants from the crowd. Can you just shed some light on how it was the players came to this unified decision that they want?
Is it entitlement? I guess we'll see. Welcome to Center Ground, your home for unfiltered discussion, where we tackle today's most talked about topics, break down current events, and give our take on the internet's latest foolishness. Tune in and let's find some common ground. Let's get this party started.
I wanted to have a conversation today about possible entitlement. And I think it's an important topic because I think entitlement branches out into other aspects of life. So with that being said, let's start with this real quick clip and then I'll start the conversation.
Welcome back to Indianapolis, where it has been an incredible celebration of the WNBA all week long. This is one of the most successful All-Star weekends we have ever seen in this league, and we know what we're talking about. We've all been covering it for nearly 2 decades.
Pay what you owe.
But something important happened before the game. As you know, the collective bargaining agreement is under discussion right now between the league and their players. And before the game, the players came out without their warm-ups on with shirts that said, "Pay us what you owe us." There is a feeling among the players, as they expressed in their meeting on Thursday, that they want to have a piece of the revenue. It has been record-sharing revenue for the WNBA, and they have not been sharing that with the players. Over 40 players showed up to that face-to-face meeting.
You gonna pay what you owe, Santa? You gonna pay what you owe?
First to negotiate the CBA, the players said there were so many of them that they had to get more chairs for the room. The thing we know about this league, the players remain united in asking for what Nafisa Collier calls 2 things that they will not budge on: higher salaries for players and revenue sharing. Brianna Stewart, the executive.
I'll stop there for a second. Now, here's a funny thing about what I heard Miss Rose said, the commentator. She mentioned that 2025 was one of the most successful All-Star games in WNBA history, which is saying a lot because they've been around since, I believe, 96, 97. That's almost 30 years, right? She also mentioned that the players have a feeling amongst them. She didn't say that they presented any facts or anything like that. She just specifically said feelings, and I think that's an important thing to note when having conversations. One thing that I've noticed is she didn't mention the fact that the league is still struggling, even though its employees are asking for more money. But that's also something that we can get on with in a little bit. She mentioned that the players themselves are united in their requests and they're not willing to budge. And I also think that's important, where they want higher salaries for the players, obviously. And they also want revenue sharing, which is a conversation that anyone who's ever listened to anything with the WNBA understands. That's something they've been shouting for a while. She also mentioned, lastly, that the players left the collective bargaining with a positive outlook, but the players still want more. And that's what brought me to the concept of entitlement. Is what's going on within this league justified, or is it just plain old entitlement? Right? And one thing I wanted to look at is the WNBA players' perspective. I think it's important to identify what people feel, even if the world isn't based on what you feel. It's always important when starting a conversation to see why people feel what they feel and why they feel that way, right? So when you're looking at it from that perspective, you got to look at it from the NBA players' perspective versus essentially the world, or at least majority of the world, because the majority of the people who have this conversation are usually not on the side with the players. I think when you also look at the conversation, you also have to look at it from a perspective of financial envy. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but if I was in a league playing a game called basketball, I too would want what everybody else, or at least the top level players of the game of basketball, what they get. So just to put it in perspective, I believe he's the highest paid player. I'm not really sure. I don't pocket watch like that, but I believe Steph Curry is making about $55.8 million. Good Lord, that's a lot of money, right? I would want that money myself. I can't get mad at them for wanting that. Versus what one of the highest, if not the highest, WNBA player makes, and that's, I think her name is Jackie Young. I mean, personally, I've never heard of her, and she's a part of the Las Vegas Aces. Honestly, not being funny, I've never heard of that team in my life, and she is slotted to make $252,450, which is significantly more than what the average American makes, let alone for a game, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what this is. So I think there's a bit of financial envy there, where they're looking across the aisle, they're seeing men play the same game that they play, or at least they perceive it to be the same game. I think some fans might look at it differently, but from their perspective, remember, this point is from the side of their perspective, and that's the fact that the men are playing basketball just like we're playing basketball. Why do they get millions when we get thousands? Despite what the fans might feel, despite what the lay person, the average person might believe, they deserve it, they don't deserve it, doesn't matter. Their belief is, if the men get this, the women should also get this. That's their view of equality. I think that's important to note. I think the other thing that's important to note is their growing list of accomplishments, right? From their perspective, they're going to tell you, hey, listen, the league may not have been the greatest over the years, but we have growing viewership. Not only do we have growing viewership, our attendance, in person attendance, is growing. So people watching us on TV, and they coming to see us, right? And that's important to note, right? If you're in a league, if you're at a job that is growing, I think it's only fair that you ask for more money, right? You're helping bring money to that organization. So you should be able to ask for more money. I think the same goes if you work at McDonald's. I think the same if you work for a Fortune 500 company. You should be able, if your company has an earnings call and they said, hey, listen, we made $1 billion, and they're talking about giving you a $2,000 raise, or even less than that, because a lot of people don't even get 2 grand raises, right? They might get a 2% raise or 1% raise, or even I remember back in the day, I got a 10-cent raise before. So I understand why the women can say, hey, listen, y'all making more money, give us some of that money. It's only right. So I understand their perspective from that standpoint, right? And I think the last thing that is important to note is when you look at their growing list of accomplishments, I think they're gonna bring up their planned league expansion. Now, it comes with the caveat: planning league expansion does not guarantee league expansion. But from what I looked up, it appears that they're trying to grow with 5 teams. I think 2 teams in 2026, that's Toronto and Portland, 1 team in 2028 in Cleveland, 1 in 2029 Detroit, and 1 in 2030 of Philadelphia. Right? So when you look at it from the league expansion standpoint, they're saying, hey, obviously we're doing something right with what we're doing at work. The league is growing, pay us more money, right? And then the third one, I mean the next one would be brand development, right? We're starting to see WNBA players everywhere. Say what you will about the me bounds and everything else, right? We're starting to see the likes of Caitlyn on cereal boxes, commercials, and everything else. And we're also seeing Miss Me Bounce herself, Angel Reese, on cereal boxes, sneakers, and other things as well. So that's where they stand. They're saying, hey, we're making more money for y'all. Yeah, the least you can do is give us some of that money. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't watch the WNBA. Personally, I find it extremely boring to watch. It's not exciting. And I think I, like most other people who love basketball, just can't really sit around and watch it. Like, I've seen more exciting street ball games personally. Now, I've watched a lot of street ball games, but I've seen more unpolished, a bunch of hood dudes just playing basketball on a Sunday afternoon would be way more exciting than possibly this entire All-Star game, right? So that's kind of where I stand. That's where my bias sits a little bit, because I understand their need for more money, their desire for more money, they want for more money, but I don't watch it. So that's all. That's there, right? Now let's look at it from the perspective of the people who disagree with them, the world, I would say, or at least majority, versus the WNBA players. The majority of the world doesn't see it the way that they see it. They don't look at the growing expansion and their list of accomplishments as a thing that we should care about. They look at it more so from the perspective of things like financial dependency. Can the league stand on its own without being propped up by anything else? Collectively, the answer, if you talk to most people, the answer will be no. They can't stand on their own 2 feet. They have to be propped up by an entirely different league, a league that they tend to compare themselves to, which doesn't make sense. It's like if you have a small coffee chain, you don't compare yourself to Starbucks and talk about you should be making as much as the top leaders in Starbucks. That's really a great argument if you ask me, because you can't start off small and expect great amounts simply because you look across the aisle and you see other people doing something similar to what you're doing. And because you think it's at the same level, that would mean it's at the same level, right? And when you have this conversation, people would argue that yes, these ladies are on TV more, right? They do have growing viewership and attendance, but one of the arguments that I've seen is okay, yes, they have growing viewership and attendance, but their seats are extremely cheap, and their audience is still relatively empty. I think if you look at the audience in the WNBA All-Star game, I see seats empty in the freeze frame, right? So it's a valid point. And if you look at the cost of those seats, people don't pay big bucks to go see a lot of these games. Like if the games cost $15, they might go see it. I've even seen it where people were offering some of these seats for free and people rejected them because they found the game to be extremely boring. And that's one thing you can't do. You can't really force people to be entertained by something that you're doing if it's not entertaining. You might be able to force them to watch, which is what the argument is. They're saying that companies like ESPN are kind of forcing the public to watch because these games are constantly on, even though people aren't really watching it on a grand scale. So, and I've even heard some of these arguments go as far as saying that this appears to be something of an affirmative action within media where they're promoting a false sense of fairness because the league is receiving unearned favor. And I think that's an important distinction as well because okay, you might be on TV, but did you really earn that time slot? And are you also pushing other programming to the side that might be able to get more views simply because the world feels this desire and this need to prop women up to the same level of men, simply because men have reached such an elevated level, right? And that's where I'm looking at it. I'm seeing the women and their argument and their desire to want more because they're working for it. And I agree, if you're working for something, you should get paid for it. However, I'm also looking at it from the perspective of most other people where they're saying, you might have worked for it, you might have worked to get in this league, but your league is a dying industry, not a dying industry, goodness. It's a dying business, it's a dying organization. And because you work for a dying company, no one should have to be subjected to what you believe is success. So here's my honest take of the matter. Whenever I look at conversations like this, I love to look at it holistically, and I love to see if, particularly when it's involving gender issues or gender identity or gender politics, you have to ask yourself this question. Since this league is currently involving an argument with women, would men in the exact same circumstance, would that argument still stand? Now, when I look at both sides, I look at it from the WNBA standpoint, and then I also look at it from what most probably the majority of other people look at it. And when you look at it from that perspective, would the argument stand if it's with men? The argument stands only on the side of the majority of people who don't like what's going on at the WNBA, right? It does not work if you try to choose the side of the WNBA. And here are historical examples of that. Any league that was created and could not stand on its own for an extended period of time, that was a male-dominated league, got shut down. Every single one. And if we really want to have a conversation about equality, which is what people tend to scream nowadays, we can't pick and choose when we want to be equal, or only picking equality when it's convenient for us. It has to be 100% equality, because that's what equality is. It means that we're equal. And if we were to create a male league that had no money, that constantly lost millions every year, that needed an entirely different league to prop it up in order for it to survive, for them to get screen time that may not be deserved, right? And the argument is always, well, you don't show us enough, so how could we get that exposure? Well, the argument is, and I think every small YouTuber would understand, if you can push out content that people actually enjoy, there's a strong chance people will watch it. Forget what the algorithm is doing, right? And so when I look at this argument from another standpoint, I look at it, the question was, is it entitlement? I think after analyzing everything and looking and reviewing over everything, I would have to say unequivocally, it is unadulterated entitlement at the highest order. Because the core of the argument is really a conflict between perceived worth and demonstrated value. And in this modern age, I think the WNBA has not shown the world that it is worth spending our hard-earned money on. It has not shown that it is worth, spending our time, our free time, watching their games. Even when the audience has put forth their opinions on what the WNBA should do, it's typically the players themselves who reject anything that anyone says that isn't in agreement with what they want to do. And to me, that only flies when it comes to women, because when men do that, everyone just shuts them down and doesn't support them. But we allow the WNBA to continue saying things that are baseless, continue making demands that they have not earned, simply because we are a society that likes to coddle our women. And with that being said, I'll probably close the video out here. And it brings me to another thought process that I might create in the next video. And I think that topic should be another good talking point, right? Perceived worth and demonstrated value. And I think I can dive a little bit deeper into that when it comes to the dating market, because a lot of people have high perceived value, I'm a 10, but can't demonstrate their value when you ask them what do they bring to the table. I think it's a growing problem in society, this growing level and sense of entitlement, where people can tell you what they deserve, or at least what they believe they deserve, what they should get, what they should have, who should give it to them. But they can't tell you what they did to deserve what they're requesting. So let's save that for next time.
Thanks for listening to the Center Ground Podcast. We'll be back soon with some more great content. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on the video. We are a new channel, and growth is essentially our main objective. So send us an email at centerground.pod@gmail.com with any ideas or clips you would like for us to review. This was definitely fun, and I'd say let's do it again. But before you go, always remember, greatness lives somewhere within you. Just make sure you're taking the time to find the key to unlock that greatness. Until we meet again, I'll see you soon.